career. Whose books include The 13th Woman and Other Stories, Sketches for a Life of Wassily, and a new book just out, Story and Other Stories, which is available. She's as well the translator of many of the works of Blanchot, including Death Sentence, The Madness of the Day, and The Gaze of Orpheus, among others. She writes an ironic, dry prose in which the speculative inner eye comments, extracting humor from the quixotic nature of daily life, can find no habits. Welcome.
On from the beginning, anyway. I don't know about ironic and what was the rest of it? Because all it is lately is sentimental love stories. With this. And what I'm gonna do is start with one of the sentimental love stories that I just finished this week. I hope I'll stop writing these pretty soon. It's been going on for about 2 years, and I'd like to get back to the short things that I used to do. I'll read some of those in the middle, and then I'll end with another sentimental love story. The first one's called My Cowboy. I want very much to marry a cowboy. This is true, although it is also true that I'm losing the desire a little now that I've moved to a city in the East and no longer see cowboys and pickup trucks in my rearview mirror when I'm out driving. But there was a time not very long ago when I seriously wanted to marry a cowboy. It started with the hat and the way it sat on a cowboy's head, and then it went on to the way the cowboy moved, that saunter, his hips in his blue jeans, the way his shoulders and arms always seemed full of power and skill. And a cowboy would just know what he had to know and not think about much extra. I am tired of all this extra thinking. And he wouldn't be anything like me or anyone I had grown up with. The fact is, though, that I wouldn't know how to talk to a cowboy, and probably a cowboy wouldn't take much interest in me. Or maybe I wanted to marry a cowboy because I didn't want to leave the West, because once I got used to the ways in which it was different from the East, I went as far as I could towards loving it, and to me that meant no longer loving the East. I loved the dry season and the rainy season and didn't want to go back to the hot and cold seasons. And I loved the bare hills that were brown in the dry season and green in the wet season, and then the way the folds of the hills where the wetness lay would fill up with shrubs and flowers, and I didn't want to go back to the thick woods of the East that covered everything equally, hills and valleys. And then there was the emptiness there in the West. The sky was larger, and after a while that large sky and that emptiness seemed to go right inside me. And the ocean pleased me the way it was always nearby, and even the people in the West, who seemed to have so much more time and goodwill than the people in the East. And so as the day came closer when I would have to leave, I more urgently and passionately did not want to leave. Or it could have started with a movie I saw a month or two before I had to go. Immediately after I saw it, as I drove away from that movie theater, on a highway with nothing ahead of me or behind me but the headlights and taillights, and nothing on either side of me but the endless darkness of a western night, there was nothing else I wanted to do at all, ever, but go out into the middle of the desert, close to nothing at all, and run a motel by myself with my little boy, and have a worn-out cowboy come along, a middle-aged alcoholic cowboy, and marry me. After I saw that movie, I started listening to country western music. I never really got very close to marrying a cowboy, but once I got a lot closer than I am now. This was late that spring. I was taking an adult education course. There was a man in the class that I got to know better and better as the term went along, because a group of us started going out for beers after class. By the end of the term, I was ready to marry him. He had paid some attention to me the first day. He had stared hard at me and then asked me if I was cold because of the way I was standing. I had had a good look at his face then, the squareness of it, his heavy lips, his mustache, his dark hair, his pale skin, his wide-open dark eyes, and I had thought that he just missed being good-looking. There was something too fleshy about him, something almost dissolute about his heavy body, and his cheeks were scarred and rough. And more than that, there was a loose or wild look about him that frightened me, as though he wasn't really holding together very well, as if he was going to fly apart or was already flying apart. That first day he spoke up in class and said something about pissing, and I thought he was out of his mind, or at least angry at everyone in the world, and I thought he would make trouble every class, though he never did. He worked harder than anyone else. Then little by little things came out when we were drinking beer, always a group of 5 or 6 of us at a round table. One thing was that he had been in the Marines, and that he had been at the front for 7 months. Another was that he had been wounded on the cheeks by shrapnel. I wasn't there that day to hear about the shrapnel, and someone told me later. Then he told me that his hearing had been damaged in one ear, and I saw how he watched my lips when I talked to make sure and catch everything I said. And he also told me his balance was affected too, and I saw how he would always veer out to the edge of the sidewalk when we walked anywhere together. All that, the war, had happened when he was 17. What also came out was his anger, though he didn't talk about that. And he had a little girl who was 6. I could tell he lived alone with her and took care of her by himself, but I didn't know how I knew, because he didn't say that. Later I kept asking myself what there was about him that gave him the look of someone who was alone most of the time, but I couldn't come up with an answer. I began to think there would always be something more about him that I didn't know. One day he came to class dressed in a shiny light gray suit, a white shirt, a gray tie, and polished black shoes. I said something about the way he looked, and he said in a happy way that after class his piano students were going to his house to give a recital. That's how I found out he taught piano to children. Another time he brought a trombone to class, and I found out that he was also a jazz musician. He told me how he liked to go alone to a jazz club around the corner from his house and sit there not drinking anything but Coke and just listen to the music. That way, he said, no one talked to him and he could just listen. He didn't want to drink, he said, because he was an alcoholic. I didn't understand that because he drank beer with us. At some point he also said to me that he had taken a lot of drugs once, but that was all over. One day when the group of us were sitting over our beers, he seemed very low and quiet, and finally he said he was going to move in with his father and send his little girl back to her mother. He said he didn't think it was fair to make her go through what she went through. He said he kept getting into bad depressions. He would just sit there without speaking. He wouldn't be able to answer his little girl when she asked him what was wrong. When he told us this, he looked down at the table and wouldn't lift his eyes. Nobody knew what to say. I was thinking about him a good deal. What impressed me was his gentleness, and then again what also impressed me was his anger. I would lie in bed in the mornings, going over everything I knew about him and fitting it all together as though I took pleasure in the very facts of his life. First I saw him being born in Virginia. Then I saw him growing up with his 2 older sisters. Later I had to correct that because he told me he had 5 older sisters. Then he started learning to play the piano. Then the family moved out west. He went to high school and played in the high school band. Then there was the war, his part in it, right after high school. Then he came back home wounded, his cheeks scarred, his hearing damaged, his balance wrong, his orientation wrong, and sometime soon after he married a half-Chinese, half-Mexican woman he was not going to be able to get along with. Or I would lie there thinking about how much his eyes showed of what he was because they were always wide open, and if he seemed more alert than anyone around him, it was because his eyes were so wide open. And even when he smiled, his eyes would not crease, which made his smile very tense. And often his eyes would move when his body was entirely still, as though it was dangerous to move anything but his eyes. And he was watching everything. Nothing went by him, and he seemed afraid. No, he was not exactly afraid, but watchful, ready to defend himself, and every conversation was also a fight. Or maybe it really was fear, but a deeper kind of fear, a fear that had left the surface of him and sunk into his bones. Somewhere in those days I began to think, because of the way he was acting with me, teasing me a little, that maybe he and I could go out together sometime without anyone else. And finally I asked him, because I was sure he would never ask me. He said very seriously, in the way he had of turning suddenly very serious, that he would like that. I was happy, and I think he was happy too, because the next time the group got together, he couldn't keep still and kept cracking silly jokes and looking at me out of the corner of his eye and smiling. The night we were supposed to go to dinner, he was an hour late, and I began to feel foolish walking to the window and back in front of the babysitter, and I gave up thinking he would come. Just when I was ready to send the babysitter home, she saw a maroon Ford outside. He walked in wearing an old shirt with the sleeves rolled up and brown corduroys with the cord worn off the thighs. It seemed very deliberate to me that he hadn't dressed up, and I liked it just the way I liked his anger, too. He stood there for a moment tensed, his body braced, his head thrown back, his arms a little out from his sides, as though he were ready for some hard work. And then he looked around and spotted the piano, and in a flash he was leaning over it and playing a tune that was so fast and pretty that the faces of the two children in the room lit up with pleasure at the sound. The little boy came awake again and smiled, and the tiny diabetic babysitter for once lost her sullen expression. Then he broke off the song in the middle and took me out of there quickly. While we were driving in his car to the restaurant after we had been talking a while, I said it. I said I wanted to marry a cowboy. He was surprised. He said I didn't seem like the kind of woman who would marry a cowboy. Then he said, I could be your cowboy. I liked that. He told me about his uncle's cattle ranch in Mississippi. Later he said, when you said I should marry a rich man, I didn't know if that was a proposal. I had said that to him once, but I'm not rich. Before we went into the restaurant, he took his gray jacket off a hanger in the car and put it over his arm, and as we walked along, tucked in his shirt and then put on his jacket. And I thought to myself that this was how a cowboy would do it too. His gray suit in the car on a hanger, and when he wanted to look a little neater than he did with his shirt hanging out of his worn corduroys, he would take his jacket off the hanger, tuck in his shirt, and put on his jacket, and touch his hair gently. At dinner I drank beer and he drank milk, and he kept supplying me with scientific facts. He worked at a job I wasn't very clear about, in which he had to fit the bones of chimpanzees together and glue them. The facts were all interesting. And he kept thinking up bad jokes that made me laugh. We didn't either of us eat very much. We were a little embarrassed to be together like this, out on a date. Then, when dinner was over, we went down to a bar by the bay to play pool. Now things changed a little because we were both drinking beer, and we were more comfortable together. I made one good shot, and that impressed him, though I couldn't make another all evening. I wasn't thinking about anything, but I was perfectly happy because this was exactly what I wanted to be doing. Then he said he couldn't start another game because of his babysitter, and I was sorry it all had to be over so soon, but there wasn't anything I could say. But when we went out into the street, we had our arms around each other, and then he broke away and started dancing across the sidewalk. When we got back in the car, he reached across me and unlocked the glove compartment. Every time we'd gotten out of the car all evening, he had first reached across me and locked the glove compartment, and every time we'd gotten back in, he had unlocked it again. Now I asked him why he was doing this, and he opened the compartment and lifted up some papers and showed me the wooden butt of a gun, and told me it was loaded, and then told me something about his little girl, and I had no reason not to believe him. When we were nearly back up the long, steep hill to where I lived, he changed his mind and said he thought he could forget the babysitter for a while, and what we did then was drive on up the road some distance and then out a dirt road to the edge of a cliff, where there were a few cars parked, and a pickup truck. And he turned on the radio, and we talked a little, and then started making out like a pair of teenagers. And I felt like a teenager, but that didn't bother me. I didn't mind feeling like a teenager because I didn't mind anything that night. In fact, every silly thing he did made me happy, and I liked his maroon car and his worn-out pants and his mustache and his jokes that sometimes really were funny. Then we got out of the car and went to the edge of the cliff to look down at the ocean and the bay and the lights that reached out into the black water from the town where we had been playing pool. Suddenly he did a strange thing, though I wasn't surprised when he did it. He picked me up in his arms and, holding me tightly, swung me out fast over the edge of the cliff and swung me in again. Then he stepped back, still holding me in his arms, and asked me if he had frightened me, and I said he hadn't. Now he ran to the edge of the cliff again, faster, and swung me out again more violently, and I was still not frightened. Then he stopped that and put me down. I couldn't tell if he had really wanted to frighten me or not, or why, but I didn't mind that either. After a while he said this was going to be the only time for him. He couldn't see me again, and then he finally told me why he couldn't see me again, and that was because his wife was flying in from El Paso on Sunday in 3 days, and they were going to try living together again, though he had told me before that nothing worked. Nothing he did. He would play the piano for her, and she wouldn't listen. He would try every way he could to charm her, and she wouldn't be charmed. He had been alone with his little girl 6 months, and now he and his wife were going to try getting back together again. The next day, driving alone in my car, I was talking out loud to him, and suddenly I began to cry, though I hadn't cried in weeks, and I couldn't stop. When I got to the bank, my eyes were still wet, and I sat there in the car and pounded on the steering wheel and said to him over and over, "Don't let them get you, don't let them." And I knew it was true, that I was not crying over losing him, but out of fear that he wouldn't survive, though he was trying hard. I felt as though he had been knocked around from all sides by everything, from the war on, and sooner or later he would be knocked down and wouldn't get up again. So that's how I came close to marrying a cowboy, and though it might not seem close at all, it felt very close to me, or at least as close as I've ever gotten. And though it's been some time now, I don't forget him, because I can't seem to forget anything anymore. I used to think I would sooner or later forget almost everything that ever happened to me, and that was how I would move from one thing to the next in my life. Now I see I'm wrong. I still move from one thing to the next, but at the same time, though I don't see how it's possible, I carry it all with me, and nothing is ever completely over. Can you hear all right?
Yes.
Yeah? That's still a little rough. Okay, now I'll read some of the short ones. I was going to say they're less realistic, but I'm not sure about that. All I'm sure of is that they're shorter, I guess. Most of them are about a page long, a little less. Visit to her husband. She and her husband are so nervous that throughout their conversation they keep going into the bathroom, closing the door, and using the toilet. Then they come out and light a cigarette. He goes in and urinates and leaves the toilet seat up, and she goes in and lowers it and urinates. Toward the end of the afternoon, they stop talking about the divorce and start drinking. He drinks whiskey and she drinks beer. When it is time for her to go catch her train, he has drunk a lot and goes into the bathroom one last time to urinate and doesn't bother to close the door. As they are getting ready to go out, she begins to tell him the story of how she met her lover. While she's talking, he discovers that he has lost one of his expensive gloves, and he is immediately upset and distracted. He leaves her to go look for his glove downstairs. Her story is half finished, and he does not find his glove. He is less interested in her story when he comes back into the room without having found his glove. Later, when they are walking together on the street, he tells her happily how he has bought his girlfriend shoes for $80 because he loves her so much. When she is alone again, she is preoccupied by what has taken place during the visit with her husband, so preoccupied that she walks through the streets very quickly and bumps into several people in the subway and the train station. She has not even seen them, but has come down on them like some natural element so suddenly that they did not have time to avoid her, and she was surprised they were there at all. Some of these people look after her and say, "Christ." In her parents' kitchen later, she tries to explain something difficult about the divorce to her father and is angry when he doesn't understand, and then finds at the end of the explanation that she is eating an orange, though she can't remember peeling it or even having decided to eat it. This is a tourist piece called In the Everglades. Today I am riding in a canopied car on rubber wheels through Jungle Larry's African safari. We pass a strangler fig tree and some caged cougars. A female leopard hides from us behind a rock. High up on the trunk of a palm in the orchid cathedral, one flower blooms beside a rusty faucet. Afterwards, we throw our trash into the mouth of a yawning plaster lion and leave for the Seminole Indian village. The village is closed, and though the village shop is open, we do not buy anything, perhaps because the Indians that wait on us and watch us pick through the beaded goods are so very sullen. Later, I sit in a short row of people at the front of an airboat, and with an unpleasant racket, we skim the sawgrass, moving fast suddenly. Animals everywhere in the mangrove swamp are disturbed, and one by one, with difficulty, herons and egrets rise up before us for miles around into the white sky. All day I've been looking at a landscape charged with the sun, and when, as instructed by the captain of the airboat, I watched the water for alligators, the broken light of the reflected sun sparkled painfully everywhere. Now it is evening, and my eyes ache as I sit in the lamplight, incapable of thinking. I look at what is around me, the walls of the room, the gold-leaf decorations, the lamp, the table in lamplight, my hands on the table, and in particular the back of my right hand, on which today a woman has stamped the figure of a huddled monkey that is now becoming indistinct and ugly. And though I try again and again, I can't remember exactly where or why this happened. This has been part of my visit to Florida. The cottages, on the one hand, on the other hand. She is 79 or so, and on the one hand, it's hard to talk to her. She has come to dinner. It's just the two of us. She eats much more than I thought an old lady would, and even after several helpings of the main meal and dessert, keeps digging into the raisin box with her clawed fingers and spreading raisins on her clean plate and nervously lining them up and tossing them into her mouth as she talks, and when they fall out on her lower lip, tipping them back in. It's hard to talk to her because she has only 4 or 5 things she wants to talk about, and she forgets the name of every person and the name of everything she wants to talk about, and when groping to describe the thing whose name she has forgotten, forgets the name of what she needs to describe to identify to me the first thing she has forgotten. She closes her eyes, leans her head back, and taps her twisted fingers on the tablecloth. And in the midst of this description, because she has gone on trying so long, forgets why she began it, and stops dead or takes a different direction altogether, she talks with her eyes closed, her wiry white hairs tied back under a thin piece of yarn, and then she opens her eyes and screams at her lolling, silly dog to lie down, and when the dog lies down, then in further irritation stamps on his head, and he rolls back his eyes in fear. On the other hand, even with only 4 or 5 subjects, she doesn't exhaust what she has to say, because she entirely forgets that she has made a remark or asked a question and had an answer to it already, and so she asks again, and I answer again, and she remarks again, and this happens at intervals all through dinner and beyond. I can't convey the truth to her. There is my truth and her memory of it. I do not know a friend of hers, but all evening she asks, do I know him? But sometimes she tells me something about the Depression and the apartments she owned in the city, and then how her husband wrote his own column for the local paper, and she never knew another writer as fine as he was. And then that is part of one long story, and she remembers everything that happened, and remembers, though she will have forgotten when I see her again, that she has told it to me now, though just barely. I think that was an exercise in writing one long sentence. So this is very short. I'll read 3 more little ones. Safe love. She was in love with her son's pediatrician. Alone out in the country, could anyone blame her? There was an element of grand passion in this love. It was also a safe thing. The man was on the other side of a barrier. Between him and her, the child on the examining table, the office itself, the staff, his wife, her husband, his stethoscope, his beard, her breasts, his glasses, her glasses, etc. I'll read two from an older book. This was 7 years ago, called Two Sisters 1 and then Two Sisters 2 is in sections. Two Sisters 1. Though everyone wishes it would not happen, and though it would be far better if it did not happen, it does sometimes happen that a second daughter is born, and there are two sisters. Of course, any daughter crying in the hour of her birth is only a failure, and is greeted with a heavy heart by her father, since the man wanted sons. He tries again. Again it is only a daughter. This is worse, for it is a second daughter. Then it is a third, and even a fourth. He is miserable among females. He lives in despair with his failures. The man is lucky who has one son and one daughter, though his risk is great in trying for another son. Most fortunate is the man with sons only, for he can go on, son after son, until the daughter is made, and he will have all the sons he could wish for, and a little daughter as well to grace his table. And if the daughter should never come, then he has a woman already, in his wife, the mother of his sons. In himself he has not a man, only his wife has that man. She could wish for a daughter, having no woman, but her wishes are hardly audible, for she is herself a daughter, though she may have no living parents. The single daughter, the many brothers' only sister, listens to the voice of her family and is proud of herself and happy. Her softness against her brother's brutality, her calm against their destruction, is admired. But when there are two sisters, one is uglier and more clumsy than the other, one is less clever, one is more promiscuous. Even when all good qualities unite in one sister, as most often happens, she will not be happy because the other, like a shadow, will follow her success with green eyes. Two sisters grow up at different times and despise one another for children. They quarrel and turn red. And though if there is only one daughter, she will remain Angela, two will lose their names and be stouter as a result. Two sisters often marry. One finds the husband of the other crude. The other uses her husband as a shield against her sister and her sister's husband, whom she fears for his quick wit. Though the two sisters attempt friendship so that their children will have cousins, they are often estranged. Their husbands disappoint them, their sons are failures, and spend their mother's love in cheap towns. Strong as iron only is now the hatred of the two sisters for one another. This endures, as their husbands wither, as their sons desert. Caged together, two sisters contain their fury. Their features are the same. Two sisters in black shop for food together. Husbands dead, sons dead in some war. Their hatred is so familiar that they are unaware of it. They are sometimes tender with one another because they forget. But the faces of the two sisters in death are bitter by long habit, and small children will not look at them. Two Sisters 2, in 5 sections. 1. The younger sister is bored in the shop and rings the bell. The older sister comes slowly down the stairs and asks the younger sister why she rang the bell. The reason is simple: to see her come down. Because she is so fat and moves so slowly, the stairs buckle and creak under her. She has trouble breathing. She holds the banister as if it were still her father's hand. Her plump knees knock together against each other. It is very amusing to the younger sister and breaks the tedium of the morning. She says none of this out loud. Out loud she says there has been a mistake in yesterday's figures. But of course the older sister cannot find the mistake, though she goes over the figures many times. Her dress is tight under her arms and her ankles are swollen from standing so long. The younger sister cannot play this trick very often or she would be found out, but that makes it all the more exciting to her. 2. The two sisters, no longer young, are forced to sleep in the same bed. They dream of different things and carefully hide their dreams from each other in the morning. Sometimes they touch by accident in the bed and fly apart as though they had been burned. They do not sleep well and are not refreshed in the morning. One wakes early, goes to the toilet, and would like to resume sleeping, but there is no joy in going back to bed when her sister lies there already sweating like a sow in the early heat. 3. My sister with thighs like pillars. She eats her potatoes as though she would make a revolution among them, as though they were the people. No, then what is this passion of hers? It is terrifying to see her cloudy eyes become sharp when my dinner is put on the table. I am afraid she will devour not only the dinner, but me and my core life, too. Beside her laughter, mine is like the trilling of a bird in the ivy. No, she never laughs. I never laugh. Her silence, though, is so much greater than mine that mine is like a wisp of smoke in a rain cloud. 4. One day the younger sister smacked the older sister in the face. She did it out of frustration and boredom with her life. She regretted it immediately afterwards, not because she had hurt her sister or stood paralyzed, her hand to her cheek and her hat rolling over the floor, but because now her sister would weep and moan and speak of the incident for months, to the younger sister's shame and anger. She had wanted to diminish her sister in some way, even to destroy her, but instead she had given her new dignity. 5. Two sisters like stone who do not speak to one another. They have nothing in common but their parentage. One rises early, and the other late. One will not eat animal products, and the other will not eat whole grains. One has a rash in the summertime, and the other cannot wear wool. One will not go to the movies for fear of strange men, and the other will not watch television. In every election their votes cancel one another, and they are as no one. Only in their mutual distrust are they alike. I guess that exhausts the subject of two sisters. And is this still perfectly audible?
Yeah.
It's not fading discouragement. All right, this will be the last one. It's called Break It Down. I'm at the moment trying to translate this into French for a French magazine. And that's a whole other experience. I see all the defects, and I sometimes can't figure out what the syntax was at all. In French, it will be called the analysis, I think, because I couldn't think of what break it down might be. He's sitting there staring at a piece of paper in front of him. He's trying to break it down. He says, I'm breaking it all down. The ticket was $600, and then after that, there was more for the hotel and food and so on for just 10 days. Say $80 a day, no, more like $100 a day, and we made love, say, once a day on the average. That's $100 a shot. And each time it lasted maybe 2 or 3 hours, so that would be anywhere from $33 to $50 an hour, which is expensive. Though, of course, that wasn't all that went on, because we were together almost all day long. She would keep looking at me, and every time she looked at me it was worth something. And she smiled at me and didn't stop talking and singing. Something I said, she would sail into it a snatch for me. She would be gone from me a little ways, but smiling too, and tell me jokes, and I loved it, but didn't exactly know what to do about it, and just smiled back at her and felt slow next to her, just not quick enough. So she talked and touched me on the shoulder and the arm. She kept touching and stayed close to me. You're with each other all day long, and it keeps happening, the touches and smiles, and it adds up. It builds up, and you know where you'll be that night. You're talking, and every now and then you think about it. No, you don't think, you just feel it as a kind of destination, what's coming up after you leave wherever you are all evening, and you're happy about it, and you're planning it all, not in your head really, somewhere inside your body or all through your body. It's all mounting up and coming together, so that when you get in bed you can't help it. It's a real performance. It all pours out, but slowly. You go easy until you can't anymore. Or you hold back the whole time, you hold back and touch the edges of everything. You edge round until you have to plunge in and finish it off. And when you're finished, you're too weak to stand, but after a while you have to go to the bathroom. And you stand, your legs are trembling. You hold the doorways, there's a little light coming in through the window. You can see your way in and out, but you can't really see the bed. So it's not really $100 a shot because it goes on all day. From the start, when you wake up and feel her body next to you, and you don't miss a thing, not a thing of what's next to you. Her arm, her leg, her shoulder, her face, the good skin. I have felt other good skin, but this skin is just the edge of something else. And you're going to start going, and no matter how much you crawl all over each other, it won't be enough. And when your hunger dies down a little, then you think how much you love her, and that starts you off again. And her face, you look over at her face and can't believe how you got there and how lucky, and it's still all a surprise, and it never stops. Even after it's over, it never stops being a surprise. It's more like you have a good 16 or 18 hours a day of this going on, even when you're not with her it's going on. It's good to be away because it's going to be so good to go back to her. So it's still here, and you can't go off and look at some old street or some old painting without still feeling it in your body, and a few things that happened the day before that don't mean much by themselves or wouldn't mean much if you weren't having this thing together. But you can't forget, and it's all inside you all the time. So that's more like, say, 16 into 100 would be $6 an hour, which isn't too much. And then it keeps going on while you're asleep, though you're probably dreaming about something else. A building, maybe. I kept dreaming every night almost about this building because I would spend a lot of every morning in this old stone building. And when I closed my eyes, I would see these cool spaces and have this peace inside me. I would see the bricks of the floor and the stone arches and the space, the emptiness between, like a kind of dark frame around what I could see beyond, a garden. And this space was like stone, too, because of the coolness of it and the gray shadow, that kind of luminous shade that was glowing with the light of the sun falling behind the arches. And there was also the great height of the ceiling. All this was in my mind all the time, though I didn't know it until I closed my eyes. I'm asleep, and I'm not dreaming about her, but she's lying next to me. And I wake up enough times in the night to remember she's there, and notice, say, once she was lying on her back, but now she's curled around me. I look at her closed eyes. I want to kiss her eyelids. I want to feel that soft skin under my lips, but I don't want to disturb her. I don't want to see her frown as though in her sleep she has forgotten who I am and feels just that something is bothering her. And so I just look at her and hold on to it all, these times when I'm watching over her sleep and she's next to me and isn't away from me the way she will be later. I want to stay awake all night just to go on feeling that, but I can't. I fall asleep again, though I'm sleeping lightly, still trying to hold on to it. But it isn't over when it ends. It goes on after it's all over. She's still inside you like a sweet flicker. You are filled with her. Everything about her has kind of bled into you. Her smell, her voice, the way her body moves, it's all inside you, at least for a while after. Then you begin to lose it. And I'm beginning to lose it. You're afraid of how weak you are, that you can't get her back into you again, and now the whole thing is going out of your body, and it's more in your mind than your body. The pictures come to you one by one, and you look at them. Some of them last longer than others. You were together in a very clean white place, a coffee house, having breakfast together. And the place is so white that against it you can see her clearly, her blue eyes, her smile, the colors of her clothes, even the print of the newspaper she's reading when she's not looking up at you, the light brown and red and gold of her hair when she's got her head down reading, the brown coffee, the brown rolls, all against that white table and those white plates and silver urns and silver knives and spoons, and against that quiet of the sleepy people in that room, sitting alone at their tables with just some chinking and clattering of spoons and cups and saucers and some hushed voices, her voice now and then rising and fall. The pictures come to you, and you have to hope they won't lose their life too fast and dry up, though you know they will, and that you'll also forget some of what happened because already you're turning up little things that you nearly forgot. We were in bed and she asked me, "Do I seem fat to you?" And I was surprised because she didn't seem to worry about herself at all in that way, and I guess I was reading into it that she did worry about herself. So I answered what I was thinking and said stupidly that she had a beautiful body, that her body was perfect, and I really meant it as an answer, but she said kind of sharply, "That's not what I asked." And so I had to try to answer her again exactly what she had asked. And once she lay over against me late in the night, and she started talking, her breath in my ear, and she just went on, and talked faster and faster. She couldn't stop, and I loved it. I just felt that all that life in her was running into me too. I had so little life in me. Her life, her fire was coming into me in that hot breath in my ear, and I just wanted to go on talking forever right there. I just wanted her to go on talking forever right there next to me, and I would go on living like that. I would be able to go on living, but without her, I don't know. Then you forget some of it all, maybe most of it all, almost all of it in the end, and you work hard at remembering everything now so you won't ever forget. But you can kill it too, even by thinking about it too much, though you can't help thinking about it nearly all the time. And then when the pictures start to go, you start asking some questions, just little questions that sit in your mind without any answers. Like, why did she have the light on when you came into bed one night, but it was off the next? But she had it on the night after that, and she had it off the last night. Why? And other questions, little questions that nag at you like that. And finally the pictures go, and these dry little questions just sit there without any answers, and you're left with this large, heavy pain in you that you try to numb by reading, or you try to ease it by getting out into public places where there will be people around you. But no matter how good you are at pushing that pain away, just when you think you're going to be all right for a while, that you're safe, you're kind of holding it off with all your strength, and you're staying in some little bare, numb spot of ground, then suddenly it will all come back. You'll hear a noise, maybe it's a cat crying or a baby, or something else like her cry. You hear it and make that connection in a part of you have no control over, and the pain comes back so hard that you're afraid of how you're falling back into it again, and you wonder, no, you're terrified to ask how you're ever going to climb out of it. And so it's not only every hour of the day while it's happening, but it's really for hours and hours after that. For weeks, though less and less, so that you could work out the ratio if you wanted. Maybe after 6 weeks you're only thinking about it an hour or so in the day altogether, a few minutes here and there spread out, or a few minutes here and there and half an hour before you go to sleep, or sometimes it all comes back and you stay awake with it half the night. So when you add up all that, you've only spent maybe $3 an hour on it. If you have to figure in the bad times too, I don't know. There weren't any bad times with her, though maybe there was one bad time when I told her I loved her. I couldn't help it because this was the first time this had happened with her. Now I was half falling in love with her, or maybe completely if she had let me. But she couldn't, or I couldn't completely because it was all going to be so short, and other things too. And so I told her, and I didn't know of any way to tell her first that she didn't have to feel this was a burden, the fact that I loved her, or that she didn't have to feel the same about me, or say the same back, that it was just that I had to tell her, that's all, because it was bursting inside me, and saying it wouldn't even begin to take care of what I was feeling. Really, I couldn't say anything of what I was feeling because there was so much. Words couldn't handle it. And making love only made it worse, because then I wanted words badly, but they were no good at all. But I told her anyway. I was lying on top of her, and her hands were up by her head, and my hands were on hers, and our fingers were locked, and there was a little light on her face from the window, but I couldn't really see her, and I was afraid to say it, but I thought I better say it, because I want her to know it was the last night. I had to tell her then, or I'd never have another chance. I just said, before you go to sleep, I have to tell you before you go to sleep that I love you. And immediately, right away after, she said, I love you too. And it sounded to me as if she didn't mean it, a little flat. But then it usually sounds a little flat when someone says, I love you too, because they're just saying it back even if they do mean it. And the problem is that I'll never know if she meant it, or maybe someday she'll tell me whether she meant it or not. But there's no way to know now, and I'm sorry I did that. It was a trap I didn't mean to put her in, because it was a trap. If she hadn't said anything at all, I know that would have hurt too, as though she were taking something from me and just accepting it and not giving anything back. So she really had to. Even just to be kind to me, she had to say it, and I don't really know now if she meant it. Another bad time, or it wasn't exactly bad, but it wasn't easy either, was when I had to leave. The time was coming, and I was beginning to tremble and feel empty, nothing in the middle of me, nothing inside, and nothing to hold me up on my legs. And then it came, everything was ready, and I had to go. And so it was just a kiss, a quick one, as though we were afraid of what might happen after a kiss. And she was almost wild then. She reached up to a hook by the door and took an old shirt, a green and blue shirt, from the hook and put it in my arms for me to take away. The soft cloth was full of her smell. And then we stood there close together looking at a piece of paper she had in her hand, and I didn't lose any of it. I was holding it tight that last minute or two, because this was it. We'd come to the end of it. Things always change, so this was really it, over. Maybe it works out all right. Maybe you haven't lost for doing it. I don't know. No, really, sometimes when you think of it, you feel like a prince, really. You feel just like a king. And then other times you're afraid. You're afraid, not all the time, but now and then, of what it's going to do to you, and it's hard to know what to do with it now. Walking away, I looked back once, and the door was still open. I could see her standing far back in the dark of the room. I could only really see her white face still looking out at me, and her white arms. I guess you get to a point where you look at that pain as if it were there in front of you 3 feet away, lying in a box, an open box, in a window somewhere. It's hard and cold like a bar of metal. You just look at it there and say, all right, I'll take it. I'll buy it. That's what it is, because you know all about it before you even go into this thing. You know the pain is part of the whole thing. And it isn't that you can say afterwards the pleasure was greater than the pain, and that's why you would do it again. That has nothing to do with it. You can't measure it because the pain comes after and it lasts longer. So the question really is, why doesn't that pain make you say, I won't do it again, when the pain is so bad that you have to say that, but you don't? So I'm just thinking about it. How you can go in with $600, more like $1,000, and how you can come out with an old shirt. Thank you.